The breath to me has always been an anchor. Anytime I feel my ship start to sail too far or is lost and can't find its way home, I use my breath as a way to bring myself back to home base, to this present moment. Because there's nothing more beautiful than being able to take a deep breath in and realize that everything is okay. Breath is one of the first things that we take in our lives, and it'll be one of the last things that we leave on this planet. It will be with us throughout our whole lives, always being taken granted for, and yet the thing that keeps us alive. The breath is a beautiful thing. Breath to everybody is massive. It's the one thing that we do automatically, and we never really, a lot of people don't put a lot of focus into it. It's been with us forever. In our culture, in Western culture, in these type of certain type of cultures, breath is something that's definitely taken granted for, and it's something that kind of we don't put much emphasis into it. And it's kind of crazy because the most important thing in life for us as humans is breath. You know, it's like the foundation of everything. It's the beginning of everything. Every good practice starts with good breathing. Every good song starts with good breathing. Every good like athlete has good breath, you know? And it's something that we just kind of we don't put enough attention into it, you know. But there are cultures in this world that do put more attention to their breath. In Hindu culture, the way that they count time on earth is not by years, but by how many breaths someone takes. And I know there's definitely like caveats to that, but I think it's a good way to look at the situation. And I think it's very important to put more emphasis on breath because it's something that we just don't put any emphasis on. And it's literally like, it's the first thing that everyone should learn how to do is how to breathe, you know, proper breath. It's so important in this life. Luckily for me, most of my life, I've been a nose breather. That's what they recommend is nose breathing. But for most of my life, I breathed out of my nose. And anytime my nose would get clogged and I had to breathe out my mouth, it would be a nightmare for me because I just personally I do not like mouth breathing. I do not like mouth breathing. It makes my throat dry and I just don't like it at all. When it comes to like all my practices I do, you know, like my working out, my meditation, all like my nutrition, the thing that I put in the least amount of emphasis in is my breath. It's like one of the last pillars in my foundation of this like building that I'm trying to build. It's rock solid. And like I was saying earlier, it's crazy because the breath is like the first thing that everyone should work on and focus on. The way I think about it is like in like martial arts, like one of the most important things is footwork, you know? Like my coach, he when he first joined his Muay Thai club, he wasn't allowed to throw punches for like 2 weeks because for those 2 weeks, all he did was just his footwork, you know, move this way, move that way, making sure his legs never cross. And he'd just do that for like 2 weeks. And I was thinking like if I were to train a fighter, what would be the first thing that I would train him? And obviously footwork is very important, but I think now that I'm doing a lot more breath work and getting more into my breath, the first thing I'll teach him is breath work and just really how to like develop a good practice of nose breathing and being able to control your breath because I think that that's the most important part of life. The nice thing though, as a kid, I did do like some type of martial arts. I don't know, if it was karate or whatever it was. But I remember one of the teachers was just telling me like you need to inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth, and that's kind of how you do healthy breath. And so from a very young age, I was taught how to breathe, but it can go a lot deeper than that because you know you can still breathe out of your nose and still be a chest breather, you know, like where the way you can really tell is if you breathe and only your chest rises and then when you exhale it closes, that means that you're a chest breather. But if you breathe in and you can like feel it in your stomach, it like makes your stomach expand, you know, and then you exhale, then you know you're breathing in your diaphragm in the lower belly. And that is the most important part about breathing because that type of breathing will put you into a sympathetic state. And what happens when you do that is that you kind of trigger your body to go into a fight or flight situation, which is good if you're maybe getting chased or you have to fight someone or your life is in danger. Then it's good for that state to get triggered. But if you're not in that state and you just are naturally just you're kind of putting your body into a fight or flight state at all times. And when you're in a flight or flight state, your body like doesn't digest its food because it puts everything that doesn't matter to the side. So then when you're able to breathe deeper into your diaphragm and everything, you get put into the rest and digest state, the parasympathetic. And when you're in the parasympathetic, that's when your body can pretty much recover from all the damage that was happened while you were in the fight or flight state. So we live in pretty good lives where we don't have to run from cheetahs or anything like that, but you can still trigger the fight or flight from like road rage or anything that like kind of like where you feel a little like agitated or you might feel the fire. Just know you're triggering your fight or flight, and then take some deep breaths and let your body rest, you know, because it's okay to be in that state for a little bit, but if you're in there all the time, you develop chronic issues. Other than martial arts though, I never like paid much attention to my breath. I just kind of naturally breathed out of my nose, and I never like put any emphasis into it. But when I got in my 20s, I stumbled across this man named Wim Hof, you know, the Iceman. I know I talked about him in my other video, but I mean, he's a dope dude. Like, he's literally a beast, and he was talking about like breath and how important the breath work was in his conquering of the cold, you know, because he's called the Iceman because he does cold stuff all the time. Like, he lives in the cold, he loves the cold, he is the cold, you know. He says his training was the breath, you know. The breath was what made him be able to kind of conquer his mind and control his mind, and it was able to for him to kind of learn how to relax in the cold. And the type of breathing that Wim Hof does, from what I understand, it's kind of like a different type of Tumo breath. And Tumo breath was discovered, well, it wasn't discovered by like, it was discovered in the Western world at a certain time, but it's like an ancient Tibetan practice. And it's like, honestly, I don't know too much about Tumo breath, but I know that it's also kind of called like inner fire breath because you breathe and like you're able to heat yourself, you know, like I heard of this one practice that they would do in Tibet where they would put like cold rags on top of the monks, and the monks would like do the Tumo breath, and then whoever could dry out the most amount of towels was kind of the winner. It was like a fun game that they would do, but it's just like they found a way to harness breath to create inner fire within themselves and to keep themselves warm. And so the Wim Hof breath that he does is kind of like from what I understand, it's a different version of Tumo breath, you know, where you go 30 in, 30 out. So, and then you hold your breath as long as you can, and then you exhale. And it's funny because we take breath for granted, but once it goes away, your body starts freaking out so crazy. And that's honestly, that's why I like breath work, is because I like the fact that my body freaks out, and it's like, it's a really good way to learn how to control your mind, because the breath work, it's a huge mind game, you know, like it's all about the mind. Like the second you stop believing in yourself with breath work, you're gonna have to inhale. But if you're able to like push through it, you're able to go much longer. But anyways, so going back to Wim Hof, he was talking about how, you know, he kind of like did his own thing. He had a rough life, and he used cold and breath to kind of conquer his demons, you could say. And so then he wanted to prove to the world that this is possible for anybody and that he's not special. So what he did was he went to the Netherlands, and he did his own independent study. And what they did in the study was they would inject Wim Hof with these endotoxins, which is pretty much like a bacteria that's like supposed to make him ill. And so they injected him with the endotoxin, and he was able to activate his immune system through his breath. And so the endotoxin didn't affect him at all. And so, of course, the scientists were like, oh, well, that's only you. You're special. So then what he did was he got a group of 10 people. I don't know exact numbers. It was 10 people, and then 5 of them he didn't train, and then 5 of them he did train. And then within like 4 or 5 days of him training them on the breath work, they were able to recreate the same results that he was able to. And that's the cool thing about Wim Hof, is like he wants to bring the science into his practice, you know, because he definitely has like his own practice and his own thing going. But he really just wants to change the world, make the world better. And he also wants to bring the science into it, because he doesn't just want people to be like, oh, that's just Wim Hof, he's just some crazy guy. He wants people to be like, no, look, here's the science, it works. I'm not special. Everyone can do this. And I think maybe that's why I resonate with Wim Hof a lot, is because I like that attitude in life. When you first hear about the study, though, it sounds fake. You're like, what? This guy activated his immune system through breath work? Like, that sounds kind of crazy. Still curious about breath work because breath work is becoming more of a bigger thing, and I was just starting to notice it more, and I was like, you know what? So I'm gonna try it. And I did try it, and it was nice. It was definitely like it's humbling practice because once you take the breath away, your body starts freaking out. Like it just starts freaking out. You can like start feeling the kicking in your stomach. You can start feeling a weird stuff going on, and it really brings you back to just being like, wow, like the breath, like a minute of no breath, and you're freaking out. You're acting like a little girl, and that part I did enjoy the breath work, but it's hard. Breath work is like it's not easy. It's very like deliberate type of practice, and so it's a toll on you after a while. And so I just kind of at that point in my life I wasn't really feeling the practice that much. Like I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it that much. So I still did do Wim Hof breathing, but I didn't do it every. I did in the beginning. I did it every single day, but slowly, I slowly started like tapering off a little bit, and then eventually I kind of just gave up the practice altogether. So fast forward, I'm 26 years old now. I'm more mature. I have more knowledge, and I'm listening to a lot of podcasts. Podcasts are a huge way that I learn personally. It's a huge way that I learn and also kind of stay in touch with what's going on in this world, because I don't really watch news, or I stay away from that type of stuff because I don't know, it's kind of depressing at times. But anyway, with my podcast, I have like a lot of different type of podcasts. I have like a fitness podcast, I have like a spiritual podcast, I have a science podcast, I have like a be a better, like stronger person type of podcast. Because I think like one important thing about podcasts is if you listen to the same guy constantly every single day and you're always listening to his podcast and nobody else, you start thinking like that person, you start saying things that that person says, and you're kind of developing a little echo chamber. And so I might be in an echo chamber too, but at least my echo chamber is big, because I try to listen to different types of people. But it's people that I resonate with. So I listen to this one podcast. It's by Aubrey Marcus, and he's a dope dude. You should check out his podcast if you want. But he's a pretty like spiritual dude, you could say. He would talk about breath work, and like I would realize, the more I listen to the podcast, the more I realize that every type of like spiritual practice or religion, they all have their own form of breath work. I feel like I do a lot of stuff to like kind of honor my spiritual side of life, but breath work was something that I kind of wasn't honoring, which is crazy again because literally it keeps you alive. So I kept listening to podcasts and I was like, damn, like I really need to start doing more breath work. Like the way I look at it is, I heard this metaphor once and I love it because you can apply it to so many things in life. Say, for example, like you want to be healthier. Well, like maybe not drinking soda and taking out processed food. It's like you have a rag that's wet, and you cut out the processed food and the sugar, or you cut out the processed food and the soda, and it's like you're wringing out the rag, and a lot of water comes out. But then, okay, so now you cut out those stuff, so now maybe you cut out sugar, like non-natural sugars, and now you're wringing it out again. But when you wring it out again, it only, not as much water comes out, and now, okay, so now maybe you want to be healthier, so you add more veggies to your diet. So now you wring the rag again, so now this is the third time you wring it, and there's even less water coming out, but you're still getting water out. I felt like in my spiritual life, I've definitely been wringing the shit out of my rag, but I felt like breath work would just be one more thing that I could wring out and just get a little extra water out of the rag. And so I was like, okay, I need to start doing breath work. I need to start getting more serious about it. And that's what I started doing. I started doing Wim Hof breathing again. I would just do 3 rounds though, which like takes maybe 5 minutes in the morning. So it's not a lot of breath work, but any breath work you do is going to help you out in the long run. If you're trying to get better at something, it usually takes longer than 5 minutes to get better at it. 5 minutes a day is great if you want to like kind of get a slow progression towards it, but like imagine if you worked out for 5 minutes a day, you wouldn't get much results. So I realized that 5 minutes of breath work is great. It's totally good. Like if you can only do 5 minutes, you should do 5 minutes. But for me, I want to be able to have a better control over my breath and my mind. And so I realized the 5 minutes wasn't going to cut it. And anything in life, if you want to get like good at something, you should spend more than just 5 minutes doing it. Spend 10, whatever. Just honor that practice. I go to the sauna after I work out at my gym, and there's a guy in the sauna, and we've been talking because we like to talk when in the sauna. I think sauna conversations are some of the best conversations you can have, honestly. But anyway, so we were talking, and he recommended this book called Breath. It's either Breath or Breathe by James Nestor, and it's a super solid book. But I downloaded it to my Audible, and then I listened to it, and man, what a great book that was. So I don't want to spoil too much of the book because maybe you want to read it or listen to it. It's a great book. It was the thing that kind of made me go from, I'm just only going to do like 5 minutes or like 3 rounds of Wim Hof to I'm going to do 5 minutes of Wim Hof and then 5 minutes of breath work afterwards. Because he's just, the way he talks about breath, and he's just a journalist who kind of goes around and studies ancient cultures, and he even does some of his own studies by like, he's like the test subject of a study by a Stanford professor where he clogs his nose for 10 days and then he only mouth breathes for 10 days, and after that he closes his mouth and only noses breathes for the 10 days. And the results are crazy. One of the most important things that you can get from that book is that you need to breathe out of your nose. When you breathe out of your nose, it's the way that the nose is like the first priority when it comes to breath. The mouth is the second. Whenever the nose is clogged, that's when it's like a backup. But we were designed to breathe from our nose, and that's the way we should breathe. But nowadays, there's a lot of mouth breathers. A lot of people they have their mouth open, and you call them a mouth breather. But that is horrible for your health in the long run. He would go and he read these books about all these ancient cultures, and all these ancient cultures, from a very young age, they taught their kids to breathe out their nose. Always breathe out their nose. He even talks about this one tribe where they didn't really like to smile, because they didn't want to accidentally breathe air in, because to them, mouth breathing was like poison, which is obviously extreme. I think it's very important to realize that nose breathing is very important when it comes to being a healthy individual. So if you're like an extreme type of person, you might take it a little bit too far. And that's kind of what I was doing in the very beginning when I first read that book. Because with Wim Hof breathing, one thing he says is he says it doesn't matter whether you breathe in the nose or the mouth. And I also know of different type of breath works. I think it's called holotropic breath work, where you sit down and you do and you breathe really hard, and you can straight up trip, psychedelic type tripping, if you just breathe hard enough. But I think that it's important to, if you do want to use your mouth, just use your mouth to exhale. What I've been doing though personally, especially when I'm in the gym and at the MMA gym, is I'm always trying to only breathe out my nose, because it's hard. It's much harder to just breathe out your nose, because we're used to, or even me, I'm used to taking little mouth breaths. If I'm talking, sometimes I'll just do take a little breath with my mouth, and I'm trying to cut that all out and just only breathe out the nose. But it almost feels harder to breathe out the nose to get a nice, good, deep breath. And it's something that you need to put awareness to. But once you start putting more awareness to, your nostrils they'll get bigger in terms of your airways will get bigger, so you'll be able to breathe better and healthier. When you mouth breathe, your mouth becomes smaller. And once your mouth starts becoming smaller, then teeth start getting all messed up and jacked up, your airway starts getting clogged, and it's so easy to breathe out your nose, and it's so much healthier. Just make the conscious effort to just start breathing out the nose more. One thing that they talk about in the book, James Nestor talks about, is he examines skulls from ancient traditions. And these skulls, some of these skulls aren't even that old, maybe from the 1800s or before the 1800s. And all these skulls have super straight teeth. And nowadays, a lot of us, I don't even have straight teeth, really. I got a little jagged right there, which is upsetting, but whatever. But a lot of us don't have straight teeth. And a big part of the reason why we don't have straight teeth is because we have a lot of mouth breathers. And even if you don't realize you're mouth breathing, a lot of us do mouth breathe, when we're sleeping, all types of things. Breathing out the nose is very important. And also another point to add to that is that people back in the day, they had a lot harder diets. They had to chew a lot more. And so that also kind of made their teeth straighter, because when you're constantly chewing, you're like it's like working a muscle, and the more you work that muscle, the stronger it gets. So it's the same thing with the jaw. So it's a combination of nose breathing and chewing a lot. But chewing a lot can be hard for us because we live in such a fast-paced society. But it's good to just start like being more conscious about your nose and just really start like just breathing more with it. So I got this from a website, but it says, if you are a nose breather, the tongue creates a good definition of cheekbones and a wider face through force exerted against your jaw. Tongues and mouth breathers have nowhere to rest, resulting in facial structure changes as time goes on. So basically what they're saying is when you nose breathe, your tongue kind of has a place to rest, and that rest that it puts a force onto your jaw, which forces your jaw to expand. Whereas when you mouth breathe, when you're breathing out your mouth, your tongue's kind of always moving. And when your tongue's always moving, it has nowhere to rest. So it's going to change the facial structure of your face. It's actually crazy because they've actually done studies where they follow people, and they found that people that nose breathe a lot more than the mouth breathers, they have much more proportionally like pretty faces. Their faces tend to be more like pretty and more proportional, whereas people with mouth breathers, their shit kind of gets fucked up. They like their jaw, like the teeth gets a little messed up. Their face isn't as proportional. I mean, it's pretty nice. It's pretty cool that you can nose breathe and make your face into a better shape. You know, like that's a huge motivation for me. Like that's cool. Like I want to do that. So whenever, like, if you need motivation to nose breathe, just be like, if I nose breathe, my face will be more proportional. Because I mean, this is super controversial, but I don't, from what I've understand, what I've read, I'm not a doctor, not a scientist, but our jaw bones, they don't stop growing as quickly as all our other bones. So you have much more of a better chance of like kind of obviously it takes time, like years, but you have a better chance of kind of redeveloping your jaw and doing certain things like that, because it's kind of like, it's a little more plastic than the rest. Not a doctor. Another interesting part about nose breathing is when you breathe through your nose, your like your nose actually cleans the air that you breathe in. So like the bacteria, because you know there's bacteria everywhere, virus everywhere. So when you breathe in through the nose, your nostrils, they clean the air so that the air you're inhaling is much healthier and it doesn't affect your lungs. Whereas when you mouth breathe, the air is not cleaned at all, because we're meant to breathe out our nose, not our mouth. So nose breathing, not only is it super beneficial, but it'll keep you healthier and less prone to getting sick. Snoring is a huge problem in the USA or in any Western world. I think it's probably a big problem around the whole world, but snoring is not good. It's very bad for you. I got this, this is from the Cleveland Clinic. They say some of the symptoms that you can develop from snoring chronically is decreased blood oxygen levels, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, being tired during the day, heart attack, high blood pressure, stroke, type 2 diabetes. And these are just like some of the symptoms that you can get from snoring. And I know a lot of men snore a lot too, like you don't think that it's a very like bad thing or a bad habit to have, but it's very sneaky. It's a very sneaky thing that can pop up on you, and it will change your life. And there's a lot of ways to cure snoring. I don't think I snore, so I don't have that problem, but James Nestor in the book, he talks about snoring and how unbeneficial it is for you. And one technique he has, again, not a doctor, but what he did when he would snore is he would take like a piece of tape and just tape it right here. And then when you go to sleep, it like forces you to breathe out your nose because you can't breathe out your mouth. That being said, when I looked onto it on the internet, some people were like, oh yeah, this works. Other people were like, this does not work at all. Some people are able to like kind of breathe out the side. So if you're looking for a cheap method to kind of help with your snoring, just put a little piece of tape, on your lips, and who knows, it might help without snoring. So that's all I'm going to talk about the physical benefits of breath work and nose breathing. Because to me, for the most part, I'm still pretty new to this, so I'm not like seeing crazy physical benefits, because my rag's pretty ringed out. I'm just like, I'm trying to get some extra drops, but for me, the biggest thing about breath work is that it's just a mental practice. Like for me, it's all mental, because if you don't come to that breath work with like the correct intention, or you're like, oh, I don't really feel like it, like you're not gonna be able to hold your breath very long. Is what I'm starting to realize. Like the self-talk I have with myself is so important when it comes to breath work, because the second I'm like, I have like that feeling of like I don't want to do this, or that I can like feel my body starts like kicking, like like a bull that like kicks at a rodeo. That's how it feels in my body, like something's like kicking inside of my stomach, and I have to like calm it down, and I can't even take a breath to calm it down. I have to calm it down in a different type of way, which is super super unusual for me with breath work, especially when you're like doing the breath holds where you're, because with Wim Hof what you do is you go and then you hold your breath on an exhale, not on an inhale. And I think that kind of, it talks about it in the book, but it's like it creates more like CO2 receptors, and the CO2 receptors, it's actually really important to have good levels of CO2. And like we're taught like CO2 can kill you, which it can, but there's just like this whole thing about the book talking about like CO2 and how important it is for you. When you're like doing those breath holds, the most important part, and he talks about in the app a little bit, is you need to slow down your heart, which sounds crazy because it is pretty crazy, but that's truly the like that's the whole thing of the practice, is you have to really like I find when I'm holding my breath, my shoulders are a little tight, so I have to like kind of release my shoulders, and then I can start like feeling my heart. My heart's like and I for me right now, because I'm still kind of new to it and I'm like really trying to get into it, I like tell my heart, I'm like, okay, slow down, slow down. And I'm just trying to have like, Enver, you got this, like positive self-talk, because that doubting self-talk in moments like that is going to be everything, because it's magnified, because when you're not holding, when you have no breath, everything's magnified. Like every little thing is, every little thought, every little movement is magnified. And so I'm having positive self-talk, and I'm really trying to feel my heart, and really just trying my best to slow my heart down, because I find that is the most important part when it comes to breath holds. And this is just like kind of going into like the grand scheme of things. I think it's very important for us to have positive self-talk with us. I know a lot of us like to be hard on ourselves, and it's okay. It's okay to be hard on yourself. Like I'm hard on myself all the time. Like if I think I want to get a bag of chips, I'm like, hell no, you're not getting a bag of chips. Who do you think you are? Or if I'm like gonna try to break a part of my discipline, I'm like, no, who do you think you are? Like absolutely not. And it's honestly more intense in my head than what I just said. But it's also very important when you're like in those moments to have like talks of just like, you got this, you can do this, keep going. Even like something as simple as like playing a game of pool. Like you're starting to lose a game of pool, you're like, no, Enver, you got this game, and the more you say it, the more powerful the thought becomes, and the more powerful it becomes, the more it might happen. So I think it's just very important for people to have positive self-talk in their lives, especially if you don't have positive self-talk. Just literally anytime you're doing anything, just like, I got this, I got this, I got this. Whatever mantra works for you, just use that and just repeat it in your head all the time. So currently my longest breath hold has been for 2 minutes, and I'm pretty proud of that. I heard that like Wim Hof does 10 minutes, so whatever. But I mean, 2 minutes for me, like that's a record for me. You would think like now that I did 2 minutes, I get like 2 minutes every time, or at least one of my 5 rounds I get 2 minutes. But that's not the truth. I've only hit 2 minutes once, and that's because I really was just like, Enver, we're gonna fucking do it. Like I just like I sat myself down, and when my body started kicking, I just kind of one thing that I realized with breath work is when your body starts kicking and you're able to kind of calm it down from the kicking, you can go like 20 more seconds, and then your body will start doing it again, and you can calm yourself down. And so that's what I was doing, because it's like suffering, and you have to be willing to endure that suffering. And I guess that day I was willing to endure more suffering than usual. But that being said, like my breathwork practice, like I'll be gaining like more time on my breath holds, and then it'll go down, and then I'll slowly start getting up and then start going down. And I find the biggest thing when it comes to like the breath work is the mental practice of it, like being able to come to your practice and just having like a clear mind, and also a mind of like, I'm gonna push myself. Like you have to be willing to push yourself to get through it. One thing that I do is, because I'm not trying to like kill myself every single morning. So one thing I do is like once my body starts kicking, I'll give it like 5 or 10 more seconds, and then I'll hit the thing to like take a deep breath in and then hold it and then let it out. But yeah, with breath work, I mean, it's a very humbling practice because like I said, once you take away the breath, you really get to see what you're made of. And I don't think you'll be very happy with what you're made of. But that's why I like the practices, because I find it's a very mental practice and it's very challenging, especially if you want to push yourself and to create new limits of your breath hold. So my current practice I'm doing right now is I do 5 rounds of Wim Hof breathing. So 30 in, out, in, out, in, out. Hold your breath. Hold your breath on the exhale, and then inhale for 15 seconds, and then that's 1 round. So I do 5 of those rounds, and then on top of that, what I started doing was, because in the book they talk about how important it is to slow down your breath. Having a slow breath is like the most important part. How slow? You should do 5 to 6 seconds in and 5 to 6 seconds out. And that's a really good breath right there. But a lot of us can't do that. And we can't do that because our diaphragm's not even used to being stretched out. Like our stomach doesn't even want to stretch out that much. So what I started doing was I do 5 minutes or 5 rounds of Wim Hof, and then I do 5 minutes of like 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, 5 minutes of that. And honestly, the Wim Hof breath work is like super, just like it wakes you up right away. But I find that the 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, it really calms you down. Like if you're like that, I find like sometimes I'll find myself just like being lost, and I'll be like, oh God, I'm not even breathing, because I'll be like so calm in that situation. But in the book, they also talk about this concept called hypoventilation, which pretty much means you're exhaling more than you inhale. So like you might exhale for like 8 and only inhale for like 4 or something like that. And so I've been doing more of that as well, because they had like a bunch of examples of like people that practice hypoventilation. They had much better cardio, especially like athletes. Like there's these swimmers, and instead of like, because when you swim, you go, and you take a breath every 2 strokes, but the swimming coach had them take a breath every 8 strokes. And these guys, they won a bunch of medals. And so for me, that's something that I'm interested in. So what I've been doing for my 5 minutes of 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, instead what I do is I'll do like 8 seconds out and maybe like 2 or 3 seconds in. I've been practicing with that because I'm curious. I would like to have better cardiovascular health. But so that's currently my practice when it comes to breath work. The beautiful thing about breath is that it's free. You can breathe whenever you want. You can do whenever you want. And it's a beautiful thing, That's another thing I love about breath work is it's like with breath work and meditation, those are 2 things where you need absolutely nothing to do. So that's why I love those practices, because a lot of us don't have the privilege to like go to the cold sauna, gym. Like some of us do, some of us don't. But breath is one of those things where you don't have to pay for. All you have to do is just breathe, Find some practices on YouTube. You could do the Wim Hof breathing. It's free, I'm pretty sure, for a while, and then you have to pay, but you can still get a good base. But I remember I was watching this video by Wim Hof, and he was like in the cold, and he was talking about the cold, and he's like, the cold's great, man, but the most important thing is the breath, because the cold is an external thing, but the breath is an internal thing. And once you're able to control the internal, you're able to control the external. And Wim Hof is known as the Iceman. Ice is like, because there's nothing sexy about breath work. Like, like when you do breath work, like there's nothing cool about it. But when you jump into a frozen lake, that looks cool, So there's more appeal to the cold. But it's like Wim Hof said, the breath is the most important thing. And I think a lot of us overlook breath. And it's something that I've overlooked, but it's something that I'm starting to get more into. And I highly recommend that you guys get into it too. Anyway, so that's my video. Thank you for watching, guys. If you stayed till the end, props to you. Love you guys.